Okay, year 4 is task 4. We're going to focus very specifically on the features of fictional writing or story writing. You'll be doing your high frequency words sheet, number 9. Then we'll be looking at the features of fiction texts, and we're going to focus specifically on settings today. And then you'll be doing a setting plan. This will be a rough plan where you will draw and write only words to describe your setting. There you have it. So let's quickly run through the types of fictional story texts, or fancy word for this is genres. Okay, the one that we know the best is traditional literature. I've said that to you before. That's folk tales, traditional tales, part of our history and part of our culture. There's legends. We get fables. We get fairy tales that you grew up with. We get Greek myths that I think we're not so familiar with when we're this young. And then we get tall tales. I think I explained to you before, but it's very exaggerated stories that people tell as if it's the truth. Okay, and then of course you get your action and adventure stories, mystery stories, then fantasy, realistic fiction, and science fiction. Realistic is something that could happen with you every day, and then of course science fiction is more imaginary and it's kind of in space or in the future. So what exactly is fiction? It is stories of make-believe. It's stories where you use your imagination. It can sound true in the way it's been told, and it can have facts. But fictional stories are not true. The fiction writers tells the story through the characters. You always write in past tense, and you get the feeling that the story could be happening right now. And then in fiction books, we find pictures that is not realistic, like Aladdin flying on his carpet over there. It's often based on opinions. Of course, as we said, it's not true facts. And then you get animals and all different kinds of magical creatures that can talk. And fiction is full of magic. So let's look at the features or the elements of a fiction story. We also talk about story elements. Okay, of course you have your characters, which are very important because that's the people or animals that your story revolve around. Your setting. That's why we're going to start with setting today. Setting is the where and the when of where the story happens, and the setting is quite important because that sets the tone and the mood and the atmosphere for your story. Then a story has a plot. That means what happens in the story. There's always an opening or a beginning. There's always a middle part where you'll get a problem, and there's a build up to the problem, and then of course the problem needs to be solved, and then you get your ending where everything comes together and it's either a happy or a sad ending. So let's look at what is a setting. So this might give you a clue. A very dark, spooky castle, or 3 ships on the open ocean, a normal setting for our environment, children at school, or deep dark forest with a tiny little house in the base of a tree. All wonderful ideas for settings for a story. Okay, let's look at the facts about a setting. It is the time and the place of a story, and often people think it's just the place, but the time is also quite important. It tells us where and when the story is happening. And finally, your setting can change during a story. If you just think about Little Red Riding Hood, It started in her mother's house, then the setting changed to the woods, and then finally most of the story happened in her grandmother's house. Place. Places can be ordinary places that we know, that we live in every day, like your school, the city. But then you can also have far off places like a jungle or a desert, or you can have imaginary places that you make up. They can be magical and they can be mystical. It's all up to you. There's some more ideas of settings. It could be in the woods, it could be in the city, it can be at the beach, a kingdom, under the sea, on the moon, at school. Anywhere you want, you can make the setting for your story. Time. So, the time of your story is quite important as well. It is something that could have happened in the past, a long, long time ago, or it can be a story in the future. It can, of course, play off during daytime or creepy and be in the night time. Stories can also happen in a specific season depending on what you want to do. Use your senses to add describing words to your setting. So that means the reader should be able to have a very clear picture of your setting. They should be able to see it, hear it if possible, touch it, taste it, or smell it. Touch means when you talk about the sandy beach, you could touch the waves and the sand. We use the setting to create the atmosphere in a story. So, for instance, you might use a frightening place, such as an empty house, like that one, already very scary. Or you can just take an ordinary place and make it seem scary by making it seem unusual, dark and cold. As you can see there, a normal neighborhood, usually looking great during the day, but look at that storm approaching. That can change the whole atmosphere of that setting and make it very interesting. So let's do task 4, your setting planning. You're going to think of places where you have been. And now you're going to use your imagination to change that place, to add something interesting. So when you think about it, you can think, do I want my place to be dangerous or frightening or a fun and safe place? Should it be a peaceful place or a strange place? Imaginary or mysterious? Can also be a magical place. It's all up to you. So once you've built your setting, we are going to bring in the characters next week. Who is going to be part of your story and why? I want you guys to have great fun creating your story setting, do your drawings, and add your describing words. Then you also need to do your high frequency worksheet. It's on page 7 of the worksheet pack. And of course, the setting description planner is also there on page 8. And I would like you to read page 51 in your English reader. Have a wonderful day and weekend.